Zambia holds its breath as Vice President Nalumango addresses Parliament with a shocking update about former President Edgar Lungu. What she said is stirring emotions across the country. Zambia is watching closely as Vice President Mutale Nalumango delivers a powerful update in Parliament regarding the late President Edgar Lungu. This announcement marks a critical moment in the nation's history. In this video, we break down Nalumango's full speech to the National Assembly, key updates on Edgar Lungu's legacy and national mourning, reactions from MPs and the Zambian public, what this means for Zambia's political future. This is the latest official government update on Edgar Lungu's passing, and it's already making waves across Africa. Loudspeaker watch now to get the full story, straight from Parliament. Detailed analysis of Vice President Nalumango's speech, Edgar Lungu's legacy, national mourning, and Zambia's political future. Introduction. On June 21, 2025, Zambia's Vice President WK Mutale Nalumango addressed the National Assembly during a question and answer session, responding to concerns about the contentious funeral arrangements for former President Edgar Lungu, who died on June 5, 2025, in Pretoria, South Africa, at age 68. Lungu's death, following a presidency from 2015 to 2021 marked by both achievements and controversies, triggered a national mourning period that exposed deep political divisions. Disputes between Lungu's family, his Patriotic Front (PF) party, and the government of President Hakainde Hichilema led to a failure to repatriate Lungu's body for a state funeral, resulting in a private burial in South Africa. Nalumango's speech aimed to address these tensions, affirm the government's commitment to a dignified process, and call for national unity. This report provides a detailed reconstruction of her remarks, an in-depth examination of Lungu's legacy, a comprehensive account of the national mourning period, reactions from MPs and the public, and an analysis of the implications for Zambia's political future. Vice President Nalumango's address to the National Assembly. Context of the speech. Nalumango's address occurred during the Vice President's question time in the National Assembly, a regular session where MPs pose questions to the Vice President on national issues. The session on June 21, 2025 was dominated by questions about the government's handling of Lungu's funeral, prompted by MPs Stephen Kampiango, Sherwangandu, and Michelo Kasata Bwengwa. The speech was not a prepared eulogy, but a response to specific queries about the funeral impasse, Zambia's international reputation, and the legality of the Lungu family's actions. Reports from the Zambian Observer and other sources provide key excerpts, which are synthesized here to reconstruct her message. Detailed reconstruction of Nalumango's speech. Based on available reports, Nalumango's remarks can be broken down into several key themes. Call for unity and depoliticization. Nalumango urged Zambians to avoid politicizing Lungu's death, emphasizing that it was a time for collective mourning rather than division. She stated, "The late president, who served Zambia with distinction, deserves to be laid to rest respectfully and in the country he once led." This was a direct appeal to move beyond the acrimony between the PF and the ruling United Party for National Development (UPND). She expressed personal and national heartbreak over the entanglement of Lungu's legacy in political debates, noting, "Though I quarreled with him, though we stood apart on policies and principles, believe me when I say my heart will forever remain broken by his passing." This reflected her attempt to humanize the discourse, acknowledging her past disagreements with Lungu while emphasizing shared national purpose. She invoked Zambia's motto, "One Zambia, One Nation," to underscore the need for unity, aligning with President Hichilema's similar calls for peace and togetherness. Government's commitment to dignity. Nalumango affirmed that the government had made every effort to ensure a dignified funeral process, including plans for a state funeral with full military honors at a Lusaka Conference Center and burial at Embassy Park, the designated presidential burial ground. She stated, "The government remains committed to according Mr. Lungu a dignified and befitting burial." She addressed the stalled repatriation of Lungu's body, noting that the government had engaged in constructive consultations with the family but faced resistance due to their insistence on a private funeral in South Africa. She expressed regret over the standoff, calling it unfortunate and a potential blemish on Zambia's reputation. Response to legal and diplomatic concerns. Responding to MP Michelo Kasata's question about whether the Lungu family's decision to keep the body in South Africa violated any laws, Nalumango clarified, "The family is not in violation of any law, and the government would have already intervened if there was any law broken." This addressed concerns about potential legal overreach and reaffirmed the government's respect for the family's autonomy. To MP Stephen Kampiango's query about Zambia's reputation as a leader in regional conflict resolution, Nalumango acknowledged the embarrassment caused by the funeral dispute, stating, "It is regrettable that this matter has become a standoff, but we are working to ensure Zambia's image remains intact." She emphasized ongoing diplomatic efforts to resolve the issue. Appeal for calm and reflection. Nalumango called on citizens to remain calm and avoid divisive rhetoric, urging, "Let us avoid speculation, divisive rhetoric, or actions that may inflame emotions." She highlighted the need for a reflective mourning period that honored Lungu's service without political grandstanding. She addressed economic concerns, noting that prolonged mourning could disrupt daily activities, particularly for youth reliant on informal economies. This echoed President Hichilema's decision to end the mourning period on June 19, 2025, to balance balance grief with economic needs. Addressing political sensitivities. In response to MP Miles Sampa's question about whether the Lungu family's demand to exclude Hichilema from the funeral was treasonous, Nalumango questioned the framing but emphasized unity, stating, "The matter at hand is serious. We should use Mr. Lungu's funeral as an opportunity to unite the country, rather than allowing political differences to overshadow the occasion." She clarified that the government never wished Lungu harm, despite political disagreements. She addressed accusations of government overreach, denying claims that officials attempted to repatriate Lungu's body without family consent, as alleged by PF leaders. Tone and delivery. Nalumango's delivery was described as somber yet resolute, reflecting her role as a mediator between grieving factions and a government under scrutiny. Her personal acknowledgement of disagreements with Lungu, framed as quarrels born of love and respect, aimed to bridge divides by humanizing the political rivalry. Her emphasis on dignity and national unity was consistent with the government's broader narrative, as articulated by Hichilema and Secretary to the Cabinet Patrick Kangwa, but faced skepticism from PF supporters who viewed it as hollow given the funeral dispute. Limitations of source material. The absence of a full transcript limits the ability to provide a verbatim account of Nalumango's speech. Reports from the Zambian Observer and Sun FM TV provide consistent excerpts, but they focus on key soundbites rather than the entire address. The speech's context, as a Q&A session suggests, it was concise, likely under 10 minutes, and focused on addressing specific MP concerns rather than delivering a comprehensive eulogy. To expand further, a verbatim transcript or additional parliamentary records would be needed, which are not publicly available. Edgar Lungu's legacy. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, November 11, 1956 to June 5, 2025, served as Zambia's 6th president from January 26, 2015 to August 24, 2021. His presidency, following the death of President Michael Sata, was marked by significant achievements, economic challenges, and allegations of democratic backsliding. Below is a detailed examination of his legacy, drawing on multiple sources. Achievements. Infrastructure development. Lungu's administration prioritized large-scale infrastructure projects, particularly roads, bridges, and public facilities, often funded by Chinese loans. Projects like the Lusaka-Ndola dual carriageway and upgrades to Kenneth Kaunda International Airport enhanced connectivity and were praised for boosting Zambia's global standing. Political analyst Lee Habasanda noted that these efforts lifted Zambia's image on the global stage. Investments in energy infrastructure, such as the Kafue Gorge Lower Hydropower Project, aimed to address Zambia's chronic power shortages, though completion often extended beyond his tenure. Constitutional reforms. In 2016, Lungu oversaw amendments to Zambia's constitution, reducing presidential powers and clarifying succession protocols. The amendment ensured that the vice president would automatically assume office if a president died, preventing the chaos that followed Sata's death in 2014. This was seen as a progressive step toward institutional stability. He appointed Inange Waina as Zambia's first female vice president in 2015, a milestone in gender representation, though critics argued it was symbolic given her limited influence. Social and humanitarian initiatives. In July 2015, Lungu commuted the death sentences of 332 prisoners to life imprisonment, citing overcrowding at Mukabiko prison as an affront to basic human dignity. This move was praised by human rights groups as a step toward prison reform. He established October 18th as the National Day of Prayer, Fasting, Repentance, and Reconciliation in 2015, reflecting Zambia's Christian identity and responding to economic challenges. The holiday remains a legacy of his presidency. Economic stabilization efforts. Early in his tenure, Lungu forced the resignation of the central bank governor to push for lower interest rates, aiming to stimulate economic growth. While this had mixed results, it signaled his intent to address economic concerns proactively. Controversies. Economic mismanagement. Lungu's presidency saw Zambia default on its international debt in November 2020, the first African nation to do so during the COVID-19 pandemic. Heavy borrowing, declining copper prices, Zambia's primary export, and mismanagement led to 15% inflation, a 50% devaluation of the kwacha, and widespread economic hardship. Relations with the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and Western donors like the United States soured, with the IMF withdrawing its resident representative and the U.S. ambassador facing expulsion in 2020 over criticisms of Lungu's governance. Authoritarian measures. Lungu's use of emergency powers to control unrest, such as during 2017 riots linked to rumors of ritual killings, was criticized as authoritarian. He openly stated he might become a dictator for once to restore order, alarming human rights advocates. The Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act of 2021 was accused of curbing online dissent, with media outlets critical of the government facing shutdowns and activists reporting intimidation. Opposition groups condemned the weakening of police independence and the use of defamation laws to silence critics. Lungu supporters, particularly the PF Youth Wing, were accused of harassing opposition figures, with Lungu failing to rein them in, which critics interpreted as tacit endorsement. Corruption scandals. Allegations of corruption plagued Lungu's administration, with allies and relatives implicated in scandals involving public contracts contracts and resource mismanagement. Lungu denied wrongdoing, but the perception of cronyism contributed to his 2021 election loss to Hichilema by nearly 1 million votes. Post-presidency, investigations into PF-era corruption continued, with Lungu's immunity from prosecution as a former president becoming a point of contention. Political comeback and court ruling. After retiring following his 2021 defeat, Lungu returned to politics in 2023 as the Tons Alliance's presidential candidate for 2026. However, the Constitutional Court barred him in December 2024, ruling that his 2 terms, 2015 to 2016 and 2016 to 2021, disqualified him, despite arguments that his first term was partial. Critics, including PF leaders, alleged that Hichilema influenced the ruling by sacking 3 judges who had previously supported Lungu. Lungu's public jogging events, termed political activism by police, and complaints of harassment and restricted movement underscored tensions with the Hichilema administration. Legacy assessment. Lungu's legacy is deeply polarizing. Supporters credit him with infrastructure development and accessibility, with Habasanda noting that he allowed the poorest of Zambians to get close to the corridors of power. His diplomatic efforts strengthened Zambia's regional ties, and his social initiatives, like the National Day of Prayer, resonated with the country's Christian majority. Critics, including Hichilema, who stated, "Respect and recognition is earned and not forced," highlight economic mismanagement, authoritarian tactics, and corruption scandals. The 2020 debt default and democratic erosion overshadowed his achievements, contributing to his electoral defeat. Post-presidency, Lungu's influence unified the PF and opposition factions, but his death left a leadership vacuum that threatens their cohesion. National mourning period. Declaration and initial plans. Following Lungu's death on June 5, 2025, the Zambian government declared a 7-day national mourning period starting June 8, extended to June 23, with flags at half-mast and radio stations playing gospel music, reflecting Zambia's Christian identity. The government planned a state funeral on June 22 at a Lusaka conference center, with Hichilema presiding and burial at Embassy Park. Funeral dispute. Government's proposal. The government sought to honor Lungu with full military honors, including receiving his body at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, lying in state at his Lusaka residence, and a public viewing at a conference center from June 19 to 21, followed by burial on June 23. Secretary to the Cabinet Patrick Kangwa led negotiations with the Lungu family, announcing a joint agreement on June 15 for repatriation on June 18. Family and PF resistance. Lungu's family, backed by the PF, rejected the state funeral, citing Lungu's dying wish that Hichilema, his rival, not be near his body. Family spokesperson Makibi Zulu accused the government of deviating from agreed plans by releasing a funeral program with excessive Hichilema involvement. The family held a private memorial at Pretoria's Sacred Heart Cathedral on June 10, attended by PF leaders and Lungu's widow and daughter Tassila. They announced that Lungu would be buried in Johannesburg, a historic first for a former African head of state buried abroad. Breakdown of negotiations. Despite initial progress, the family halted repatriation on June 18, citing government overreach. PF Secretary General Mangani Nakasinda accused officials of intimidating medical staff in South Africa to seize Lungu's body, a claim the government denied. The dispute led to competing mourning venues. The government designated Mulungushi International Conference Center, while the PF directed mourners to its headquarters, causing confusion. Separate condolence books further highlighted the division. End of mourning period. On June 19, Hichilema abruptly ended the mourning period, citing the family's refusal to repatriate Lungu's body and the need to resume normal activities. Governance expert Samson Zulu praised this as balancing mourning with economic needs, particularly for youth reliant on daily income. The decision drew criticism from PF Vice President Given Labinda, who accused Hichilema of using emotions to cancel mourning, further fueling tensions. Impact on national sentiment. The mourning period, intended to unify Zambians, instead deepened divisions. The government's insistence on a state funeral clashed with the family's desire for autonomy, reflecting the personal and political animosity between Lungu and Hichilema. Public confusion over mourning protocols, compounded by competing venues and condolence books, denied Zambians a cohesive farewell. Social media reflected frustration, with some South Africans mocking Zambia's predicament, posting comments like, "We can't bury foreign ghosts here." Reactions from MPs and the Zambian public. MPs' reactions. Stephen Campiongo, Sherwangandu, PF. Campiongo questioned the government's handling of the funeral impasse, asking, "What is the government doing to maintain Zambia's reputation as a leader in regional conflict resolution?" His query reflected PF concerns about international embarrassment and government overreach. As a PF loyalist, he joined other MPs in attending Lungu's private funeral in South Africa, signaling solidarity with the family's stance. Michelo Kasata, Wengwa. Kasata asked whether the Lungu family's decision to keep the body in South Africa was illegal, highlighting legal and diplomatic concerns. Nalumango's response clarified the family's legal rights, diffusing potential accusations of lawbreaking. Miles Sampa, Maturo, PF. Sampa questioned whether the family's demand to exclude Hichilema was treasonous, a provocative query that Nalumango countered by emphasizing unity over division. His question reflected internal PF tensions, as he had previously led a rival faction before rejoining Lungu's camp in May 2025. PF MPs' collective response. Several PF MPs, including acting President Given Lubinda, traveled to South Africa for the private funeral, rejecting the government's plans. Lubinda criticized Hichilema's decision to end mourning, calling it a political maneuver that disrespected Lungu's legacy. Internal PF cracks emerged, with Lubinda lambasting Makibi Zulu for miscommunication about repatriation plans, highlighting disorganization within the party. Public reactions. Grief and shock. Lungu's death shocked Zambians, given his relative youth and continued political influence. Radio stations played gospel music, and churches held services, reflecting the nation's Christian ethos and respect for mourning traditions. Tasila Lungu Mwansa's announcement on social media, followed by condolences from regional leaders like Kenya's William Ruto and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, amplified public grief. Confusion and frustration. The funeral dispute left mourners uncertain about how to pay respects, with competing venues and condolence books causing chaos. The Republican Progressive Party, RPP, condemned PF factions for selfish, childish, and politically motivated actions that denied Zambians a dignified farewell. Social media reflected division, with some supporting the family's autonomy and others criticizing the PF for politicizing the process. Posts on X highlighted the international embarrassment, with one user noting, "History will judge this moment not with the bias of politics, but with the clarity of time." Religious and traditional voices. The Evangelical Fellowship of Zambia expressed sadness over the decision to bury Lungu in South Africa, urging a return to Zambia for a unified farewell. A traditional leader echoed this, calling for a burial free from complications or politics. These voices underscored the cultural expectation of burying leaders in their homeland, a norm disrupted by the family's decision. International reactions. South African social media mocked Zambia's predicament, with comments like, "We can't bury foreign ghosts here," reflecting diplomatic strain. South Africa's facilitation of the private funeral, praised by the Lungu family, highlighted its neutral role amid the controversy. The African Union, through chairperson H.E. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, commended Lungu's contributions to democratic governance and regional cooperation, calling for peace during Zambia's mourning period. Implications for Zambia's political future. Lungu's death and the funeral dispute have profound implications for Zambia's political landscape, particularly as the 2026 elections loom. 1. Opposition fragmentation. PF leadership vacuum. Lungu's death leaves the PF without its unifying figure. Factionalism, evident in disputes between Miles Sampa, Given Lubinda, and Robert Shibinga, risks fracturing the party. Sampa's brief rival presidency in 2023 and subsequent reconciliation in May 2025 highlight ongoing tensions. Taunts Alliance challenges. Lungu's role as the Taunts Alliance's 2026 candidate was central to opposition unity. His absence creates uncertainty, with no clear successor to rally diverse factions, potentially splitting opposition votes. 2. UPND's strategic advantage. Consolidation of power. The UPND, under Hichilema, gains leverage as the opposition struggles. Hichilema's decision to end mourning, while controversial, was praised by some, like Samson Zulu, for prioritizing economic stability, potentially strengthening his appeal among pragmatists. Authoritarianism concerns. Allegations that Hichilema influenced the 2024 court ruling against Lungu and restricted his movement's fuel perceptions of authoritarianism. These could alienate moderate voters if not addressed through transparent governance. 3. National unity and reconciliation. Missed opportunity for closure. The funeral dispute denied Zambians a unified mourning process, deepening PF-UPND divides. Constitutional lawyer John Sangwa emphasized the need for laws clarifying state and family roles in presidential funerals to prevent future conflicts. Erosion of trust. The government's abrupt end to mourning and PF accusations of insensitivity risk eroding public trust in institutions. Hichilema's unity calls may struggle to resonate amid these tensions. 4. Regional and international perception. Diplomatic embarrassment. The dispute strained Zambia-South Africa relations, with South Africa navigating a delicate role as host to Lungu's funeral. Ramaphosa's condolences and facilitation of the private ceremony underscored diplomatic sensitivities. Democratic image. Zambia's reputation as a stable multi-party democracy since 1991 is at risk if political rivalries overshadow national interests. The funeral row highlights the need for stronger institutional frameworks. 5. Policy and legislative needs. Funeral legislation. Sangwa's call for clear laws on presidential funerals underscores a gap in Zambia's legal framework. Defining state and family roles could prevent future disputes. Economic priorities. Nalumango's reference to economic challenges like drought and currency fluctuations suggests that the UPND must focus on recovery to maintain public support. The mourning period's disruption highlighted the tension between ceremonial duties and economic imperatives. Conclusion. Vice President Nalumango's address to the National Assembly sought to navigate the complex fallout from Edgar Lungu's death, emphasizing unity and dignity amid a contentious funeral dispute. Lungu's legacy, marked by infrastructure gains, constitutional reforms, and economic and democratic challenges, remains a flashpoint in Zambian politics. The national mourning period, intended to unify, instead exposed deep rifts with the government, PF, and Lungu's family at odds. MPs and the public expressed grief, confusion, and frustration, while the international community watched Zambia grapple with its image. The implications for Zambia's political future include opposition fragmentation, UPND consolidation, and the need for institutional reforms to foster unity and stability. As Zambia approaches 2026, resolving these tensions will be critical to maintaining its democratic legacy.